Funding for New Mexico in Focus provided by viewers like you.
This week on New Mexico in Focus, encampments on campus. A special roundtable looks back at the last few weeks of pro-Palestinian protests at the University of New Mexico.
Go along this journey with us. We're asking for a degree of transparency which is currently not available about their investments.
And standing with students. Why Jewish Voice for Peace New Mexico wants UNM to divest from Israel. New Mexico in Focus starts now. Thanks for joining us this week. I'm executive producer Jeff Proctor. On April 30th, police arrested 16 pro-Palestinian demonstrators after they occupied the Student Union building in a protest calling upon the university to divest from the State of Israel. The moment followed more than a week of protest at UNM's Duck Pond, a home that organizers have since returned to after those early morning arrests. These encampments are part of a larger movement, as similar demonstrations have taken place on campus grounds across the country, leading to thousands of arrests. It's a complex topic, and we've dedicated most of this week's show to exploring it. A little later, we'll hear from Sophie with Jewish Voice for Peace New Mexico. As a recent UNM graduate and now university staffer, Sophie talks about the power of student-led movements and the welcoming nature of this one. But first, Source New Mexico editor Sean Griswold hosts a roundtable discussion on the matter with UNM Law School professor Ernesto Longa, who helped draft the divestment resolution, civil rights and criminal defense attorney Ahmad Assad, and Daily Lobo multimedia editor Paloma Chapa.
Thanks, Jeff. Ernesto, the common thread heard from protesters at college campuses across the country is this idea of divestment. So what are UNM's investments in the State of Israel, and what would divestment look like?
Okay, well, this is a fairly difficult question to answer. We know that UNM has a significant endowment pool that's managed by the UNM Foundation. And
You're saying millions of dollars in this, right?
Yeah, hundreds of millions of dollars. Okay. I believe the UNM's last financial audit reported having 700 of their consolidated investment pool consisting of about $715 million.
And this is all in research you've had to do independently, is that correct?
Yes, I mean, some of this information is readily available on their web pages through their financial audits. The UNM Foundation reports a kind of high-level information about its investments in a series of funds based on asset categories and things of that type. So we've submitted a series of public record requests to try to gather some additional information, but are really running into a bit of a wall.
So do we have an actual figure as to how much UNM is investing in the State of Israel?
No, we don't. But we have begun to gather some sense of maybe what some of its financial connections are to Israeli companies primarily. So some of the funds that UNM is invested in make publicly available their holdings. So, for example, UNM is invested in BlackRock, one of BlackRock's index funds. And we know from its investments in BlackRock that it has connections to companies that produce military weapons that are used and that are being used in the assault on Gaza and in sustaining the illegal occupation in Palestine.
Okay, and that's directly related to what divestment would look like if UNM were to approach this. Is that correct?
Yes, exactly. I mean, there's some good resources out there that would help guide us in informing, what divestment would look like from which companies. The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, for example, has identified 112 businesses, mostly Israeli companies, which profit off of the illegal occupation. As a starting place, we could consult a list of that kind. Of course, there's other divestment lists that look at U.S. involvement as well, okay. Weapons manufacturers primarily.
Got it. And Ernesto, it's very fascinating to know that just the audit itself, understanding what that number is part of what the group create the encampment at UNM is looking for. And that's one of the things you're asking the Board of Regents to begin, correct? Is that audit process?
Well, no, I think what we're asking the Board of Regents to do is to go along this journey with us. We're asking for a degree of transparency, which is currently not available about their investments.
Okay. Paloma, I have to ask now. Now let's go to the encampments a little bit and the protest. You were one of the first journalists in New Mexico to see the encampment at UNM get established. And when the Lobo did first notice this, what was UNMPD's involvement when you first started this coverage?
Well, during the day, like in the early part of the afternoon, there was no police involvement. When they first started pitching the tents.
And this is on day one, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
It was a Monday.
A Monday.
And it started out with a march and rally, starting from the sub to the bookstore and then to the duck pond. And then at the duck pond is when people started bringing out tents and pitching them. And there was no police presence at that time until about, well, at 6 p.m. then they put the first notice on the tent that this was a violation of UNM policy. And then at 8 p.m. when there was a rally that happened that evening because it was also Earth Day, the police did come, and it was UNM and state police officers that came to the encampment and brought up policy again. They tried to make the protesters remove the tents that were there, but they picked up the tents and picketed with them. And the officers pretty much just stood there until like late at night, and they didn't really do much except for stand there. And I talked to one of the UNMPD officers to try to get a statement from them, and I didn't get one.
When did you first notice New Mexico State Police show up on campus around the encampment?
It was 7:51.
Oh, that night, the first night New Mexico State Police were there.
Yeah.
Okay, and so later that night, your reporting showed that police did interact with the protesters and clear out the encampment. Later into that, we saw some of that similar pattern throughout the week. Now, I'm curious, because the duck pond is right in the middle of campus, which means everybody sees the encampment. So what have you noticed as a reporter as well as a UNM student in terms of the way that the folks on campus are interacting with the protest and encampment?
Yeah, I think I haven't really noticed much of except for one day, there was a counter-protester who came with signs and stuff, but otherwise I haven't noticed much interaction as far as people opposing it. I haven't been there 24/7, so I'm not sure, but from what I can tell, those who are engaged in the encampment are there, and those who aren't kind of just walk by from my observation.
Okay, and of course you can't be 24/7 because you're also a student who has finals this week. And
Yeah.
we could talk more about what that's been like to cover all of this with finals going on a little bit later. But Ahmad, I want to ask you, so legally speaking, what rights do students have to protest the way they have at the duck pond?
You know, every university campus, fundamentals of freedom of expression and speech are vital to this dialogue, to learning and sharing knowledge. And it is incumbent upon every university to have that type of environment for students to be able to express, and rather than forcibly silence these folks, more dialogue and more speech is encouraged with a wide variety of views. So the students have every right to protest within the confines of their First Amendment rights, and as long as there isn't an impediment to the operation of the university, or there isn't physical threats that are occurring, they have every right to pursue their ability to express what is cherished and what is protected in our Constitution.
Okay, and a week after the encampment was set up, we saw this escalate to the situation at the Student Union building. You know, there's images around us that show a lot of what Paloma and her sister and their Daily Lobo colleague caught. So I'm curious, from your perspective, what's different from a legal perspective once the group decides to occupy the Student Union building?
I think there is a distinction with regards to administrative policies versus criminal acts, and so from a very general statement I'd like to start with is that the fostering of the environment really is a responsibility of the university. And I love what Ernesto said earlier about wanting that university to go on that journey that he spoke about, because it's always supposed to be about the faculty, the administration, and the students as one. When we start going at separating students away from faculty and administration is where the problems start. So I fault the university for not having historically better relationships, understanding student organizations, fostering an environment for more dialogue, for an opportunity to have speech. But with regards to specific instances in terms of the difference between being an encampment and occupying the sub, there may be a distinction, and that's going to be drawn by the facts. And here's ultimately where it comes down to, is whether in fact this rose to the level of something that is contrary to the policies, and whether they were acting within their rights peacefully to protest and allow for the students' freedom of expression. That's going to be dictated by case-by-case basis, quite frankly.
And what about the general views of the act of civil disobedience? Paloma and I was also there with Paloma and covering that night at the Student Union building. We were there, well into the next morning, and there was a general conversation around everybody that this was an act of civil disobedience. You may have to expect to get arrested. Mm-hmm. There was preparation around all of that. With all that stated as fact too, is there any element regarding free speech when it comes to civil disobedience on campus?
I think that it's also contextual in the sense that you do have a right, understanding the responsibilities and the consequences it may have. Several students have expressed the idea that even if we are arrested, it's nothing compared to what the Palestinians in Gaza have been going through, and the deaths and the genocide that is occurring. So there is a sense of consequence that has been recognized by students. But I also think that there is opportunities for the university to foster some de-escalation on their part. There is a responsibility to ensure that we don't go and call in state police and have a forceful uprooting of students that occupy the Student Union building. I really do feel that was over the top with regards to the reactions by the university. And this is, again, an academic setting to where freedom of speech is primarily what universities must foster and are known to foster. This is an exchange of an academic environment where civil disobedience is part of a conversation that occurs. And this world has many issues that are concerning to this generation and these students, and they are finding ways to express it. So I think within the context of their responsibilities, as long as there isn't an outright impediment to the operation of the university, mm-hmm. as long as there isn't this notion of physical threats to other students, they are to be protected. And we talk about this notion of protection, right? Mm-hmm. Hand in hand with the ability to have speech be protected and threats to be protected. These threats and safety of others need to be protected, the counter, if you will, the counter opinions. But protections are also afforded to people that want to express their political opinions about what's going on in the world, mm-hmm. as here. And I think the university needs to recognize that those students need to be protected.
All right, thank you for that. And Ernesto, I want to come back to you and wrap up this segment here. Something that was just stated here, and something we heard consistently from people at the camp and inside the protest is, yes, the situation that we're responding to is nothing compared to the genocide that people in Gaza are facing and the daily attacks. Now, I'm curious about the idea of civil disobedience and the tactic used to make that a priority that night, but in recovery since then, with that action now done, can you discuss sort of what that shifted in the mood and in terms of like how discussions for tactics happen in the encampment for stuff going forward? Because I imagine this is not going to stop anytime soon and will likely go into next school year, excuse me.
Yeah, I would anticipate that the encampment continue to work to bring pressure on the university to address some of our demands. I think it's important to remember and always center what's happening in Palestine. There's a genocide underway that has mobilized students who have deep concerns and who feel that they have a moral obligation mm-hmm. to stand up and speak out against what's happening. And so I anticipate that the demands to disclose our financial relationships to Israeli companies as well as U.S. companies that are sustaining and profiting off of the assault on Gaza and the illegal occupation to continue. Divestment is a key tactic to express our moral outrage about what's happening right now.
Thank you. Ahmad, real quickly here to wrap up, can you please discuss what legal role you may have in helping the people who were arrested at the sub?
Thank you. Full disclosure, I've committed myself and my office associates to representing pro bono any of the protesters. We have not yet concretely entered an appearance on any of them. I anticipate that probably will happen.
Okay, and then have you had any, what conversations will you offer for them in terms of review of any of the case? What can you offer for people who contact you?
We'll offer them the fullest defense that is possible. We are firmly in belief that there isn't a Palestine exception to the First Amendment and your right to speech and freedom of expression. We will afford them a vigorous defense in this regard. I anticipate arraignments are coming up for these students.
Next week, yeah.
That's
right.
right.
All right, I have to interrupt you there. That's all the time that we have for now, but we'll be right back here at the table toward the end of the show to dig a little bit deeper.
It seems like it should be straightforward enough, but one of the most fraught questions in American discourse at the minute involves the difference between anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism. Government officials at the state and federal levels have complicated the matter, as you'll hear in my conversation with Sophie. Sophie is a member of Jewish Voice for Peace New Mexico, a recent UNM graduate and now a staffer on campus. We talked about why her organization stands with the Palestine Solidarity Movement and why its moment is now. Sophie, thank you so much for joining me this week on New Mexico in Focus.
Thank you so much for having me and inviting me.
So how did Jewish Voice for Peace New Mexico become involved with the Palestine Solidarity Movement, and why?
Yeah, so Jewish Voice for Peace is an organization that stands in solidarity with Palestinians and has for a very, very long time. As I think everybody knows by now, this has been an ongoing issue that has started long before October 7th, and there have been advocates standing in solidarity with Palestine long before October 7th. And Jewish Voice for Peace is one of those. And so when a lot of organizations really started stepping up to stop the ongoing genocide that's happening in Palestine, Jewish Voice for Peace was one of those. And so it made sense that all of these valued aligned organizations would find each other and support each other. And so that's kind of how JVP became a partner with the solidarity camps and that kind of thing.
Gotcha. I think you answered my next question. You said the word genocide. I was going to ask what specifically in this context your organization opposes. So I'll ask the second part of the question. What does Jewish Voice for Peace want the University of New Mexico to do?
So Jewish Voice for Peace is there to support what the students want, and really stand with the students. We recognize that this is a student-led movement. And so Jewish Voice for Peace is not like dictating, like, here's some talking points, here's the things that are like you pushing their own agenda, but are really being led by the students. When it comes to what the students are asking for, they're asking for divestment, and they're asking for a disclosure of the investments of the university. And there is a divestment resolution that was drafted that is very similar to the ones that were created in the 80s that stand against South African apartheid. And really what they want is to pull money back from weapons manufacturing companies, especially as they pertain to those that give weapons to Israel. And so, yeah, we're really following the lead of students and supporting them in whatever capacities that they need.
So let's back up a little bit. From your perspective, how has UNM leadership handled the Palestine solidarity movement during the past few years? And did that change at all after the Hamas attack on Israel on October 7th?
I don't know that I can speak to like the length of how the university has handled it. Um, Besides like the statements that they've put out when it comes to the solidarity camp, which in many ways speak for themselves. I know what a lot of students are really looking for is that conversation and that dialogue to have with administration so that they can feel heard and they can feel like they have a voice on campus, which they don't feel that they have. Yeah.
Sophie, do you think it's fair to say that the university, at least since you've really been involved here, has taken sort of a passive or hands-off approach? Does that ring the tuning fork for you?
Yeah, I think when it comes to many public institutions, including this university, that there's a sense that there needs to be a kind of neutrality. And one of the big frustrations is that when it comes to some of the really extreme images that we're seeing that are coming out of the genocide that's happening in Palestine, that there cannot be a neutral stance, and that making no statement is actually a very heavy statement in itself. And so that's really where the frustration is coming from, where a neutral stance isn't doing it for a lot of the students. They want more than that, and are demanding that.
Sort of neutrality in and of itself is an affirmative choice, right?
Yeah, in many ways. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Let's dig a little bit deeper into this. 2 years ago, Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham signed an executive order adopting the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance's definition of anti-Semitism for the state of New Mexico. The U.S. House recently passed a resolution doing the same at the federal level. What do you know about that definition? And do you see any potential problems or pitfalls with its use this way by government entities?
I think it's important to note like the definitions of anti-Semitism, which kind of conflate anti-Zionism again, are like really a red herring to the issue at hand. And in many ways, don't like not all Jews are a monolith. And certainly it doesn't speak to the Jews that I know, who have experienced anti-Semitism. I've certainly experienced anti-Semitism. And really it's so far from the actual issue at hand, which is the genocide of Palestinians and investments in weapons manufacturing. So really when it comes to those definitions and that kind of thing, it's so far from like what the issue that is being discussed at the encampment is. Like the encampment has become such a place of learning, especially for the students. They've had like teach-ins, classes have been held there. They're learning to like draft language and that kind of thing to articulate divestment, and they're learning about past movements. And so the discussion of like, is it anti-Semitism seems so detached from what they're doing. And really all of the debate and things that have been going through Congress and that kind of thing to define anti-Semitism in relation to it are very much seem to be a distraction.
I appreciate you answering that
Yeah.
question too in that way. So you graduated from UNM in 2023, and you now work at the university. I want to make clear for purposes of this conversation that you are speaking as a member of JVP and as a member of our campus community, not speaking for the university or the particular department you work in. But I
Yeah.
want to ask, what has your experience been like on campus as a former student and now as a staffer who is Jewish?
Yeah, I feel like a very welcoming environment from the other students on campus, from the people that I work with. Yeah, I don't feel any animosity or that kind of thing. I think there is a sort of nervousness that people approach this topic with, because there is no like they don't have like the language to take into these conversations. And so there is like a hesitancy that I'm seeing from a lot of people on campus who are kind of nervous to like approach the encampment and that kind of thing. Because they don't know, like, am I going to be associated with something like really wrong? Am I going to be accused of anti-Semitism? All that kind of thing. And so I think sometimes there is kind of like a walking on needles kind of thing, but the general energy that I get from the students is really wanting a discussion, really wanting to be engaged in their campus, be engaged in the processes of the university, um, and to want their voices represented by the voices of the university.
Sophie, this is my last question, and I'm not going to ask you to try to answer it globally, but from the perspective of our campus community here at UNM, why is all of this blowing up the way that it is now? Why this moment?
I really think it has reached such a breaking point for many people. We've been in this like heightened state for like 7 months now, really, since like October 7th. People have been going through the phases of grief just over and over, I think, with like anger and sadness and like these depression. It's really difficult to see the images that are coming out of Palestine every single day. And it wears on people. And I think what we're seeing now is a culmination of that emotion and of that frustration manifesting itself with young people who are really inclined towards social change, who are really have been historically like the forebears of progress. Young people are at the front of like almost every historical movement. And so I think what we're seeing now is a culmination of being worn down by just a growing frustration with leadership, and wanting to be a part of that leadership, wanting their voices heard.
Sophie, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate the conversation.
Yeah, thank you again so much for having me.
Weeks before cops in riot gear stormed into the student union, I spoke with Sarah Silva, a community organizer based in Las Cruces. Sarah has been in the trenches on countless thorny issues for 2 decades. As we prepared for this week's show, we knew Silva's experience rallying others for political and systemic change would add important context. It's an election year, and Sarah's line of work has had a bad rap in the run-up to Americans heading for the polls since Barack Obama arrived on the scene in 2008. Our conversation begins there. Sarah Silva, welcome to New Mexico in Focus.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So we're going to talk about community organizing today, of course, and there's a lot to get to, including some of the work that you've been doing in that space in southern New Mexico for many years. But I want to start with kind of a basic definition. Community organizer has become something of a cudgel. Many viewers will remember John McCain's campaign, using it as a way to paint Barack Obama as some kind of subversive evildoer during the 2008 election cycle. So what is a community organizer?
That's a great way to start. So a community organizer is someone who develops and equips people in communities to articulate, seek, and negotiate their goals and purposes in public life. So it's a fancy way of saying, like, my job as an organizer is the ability to move people together consistently to represent their broader community needs to compel people in power over and over again.
And we'll get to some of the head impacting the wall nature of your work in a bit. And I realize that this work can tend to be issue specific, and we'll talk about that some in a moment as well. But broadly speaking, what is the purpose of community organizing? What does it or what should it aim to accomplish?
Well, when I started organizing, so I started organizing in 2004, and I always thought that my life growing up would have been very different if a community organizer had knocked on my family's door when I was a kid, growing up in Southern Joniana County. And like part of organizing is looking around and seeing like what are the problems that are facing our families day to day, our communities, and what are the ways in which we can make it different. So that can be like raising the minimum wage, for example, or getting as local as like getting a crosswalk installed to slow down traffic during school hours. It's the things that are most important to the folks that are actually organizing. And then there's these larger movements that we can see across the country. But really, it's like all organizing is local. So it's like, look around, what are the issues and the problems you see? And is there a community that can help compel some change around those things?
Let's finish with the definitional stuff briefly,
Mhm.
if we could. How does your work in community organizing differ from, say, activism or advocacy, as people tend to understand those terms?
Yeah. So the difference is that organizing and as an organizer, we're called to be students of power and study power dynamics. And that means that like the advocacy doesn't stop with, so advocacy means me going on behalf of somebody else and saying, go help those people over there. That's advocacy. Like I'm speaking on behalf of somebody. And then mobilizing is almost like a one and done, like flash movement. And often that you can see that, and that's an element of organizing, but it's not the only thing that is the way that we exercise power. Organizing is about creating durable, lasting relationships and movement so the community can represent itself in like the ways in which power and decisions move in those communities. So organizing is connected to durable and accountable communities and constituencies. So as an organizer, I'm going, say, to a bunch of congregations or schools or neighborhoods, and I'm getting to know people and their issues and what they're struggling with. And I'm not like, okay, let me go and advocate for you. But then we say, what do we do together? And what do you want to do about it? And then I'm offering the tools, support, and pathways to help people achieve their own goals. And sometimes that can turn into a protest, but often it can turn into lobbying at the city, state, county, national level. Or that can look like big public actions against the landlord. So it can manifest in a lot of different ways.
Gotcha. It's sort of the difference between a locally based journalist and what we call a parachute journalist, right? Somebody who pops in for a quick second.
Exactly. So, yeah, we have to watch out for those carpetbaggers that come into our community, journalists or organizers.
Thank you for using the C word. That means I don't have to. So how has this work changed over the 20 years that you've been doing it? And what have been some of the primary drivers of that change?
So I'm going to speak to, I'm not going to get everything, right? Because a lot has happened in 20 years. But when I started organizing, no one knew what an organizer was. Like I'd say, like, oh, I'm an organizer. And people would say, so do you go to people's houses and like clean their closets?
Like you're a trapper keeper or something.
Yeah. And then that was at the time that Obama had just started his campaign for presidency. He was just beginning to come on the scene. And so no one had a reference point to organizers. And then the reference point became President Obama. And then it like snowballed into that. So what has happened since then, a lot of different things have shifted. So one, I would look at the financial crisis in 2008 that drove so many families into losing their generational wealth and their homes. That was a huge dent that many organizers were dealing with. And at the same time, like a few years before, Acorn was basically targeted for registering millions of low income and brown and black people to vote. And through a couple of their own bad decisions, but also through targeting, like that organization ceased to exist as we knew it, because they were exercising power that was scaring the status quo. So we've seen that over and over in different parts of the country where people's capital and self-interest gets threatened, and then organizers get targeted for that. I think we've also seen like all the work on the Palestinian movement and working on Free Palestine and Gaza and calling for a ceasefire. We've seen a number of people coming out and organizing around that consistently and repeatedly. And that's never happened before, not in the US. And so I think that is beginning to shift, and that's just more recent. And then the pandemic. I think the pandemic has also created a lot of different conditions for how people organize. And I could keep going, but I want to talk about how the differences of organizing have shifted as we're talking to, because there's just so many ways to look at how organizing and people who have like organizers on the ground are changing the way we look at policing, at abolition. All of these things are converging in several communities across the country simultaneously.
I want to talk just briefly to follow up there about what I often refer to as the democratization of information, right? Like I grew up in the newspaper tradition where what we did was we sent a bunch of people out to gather as much news as we could in a given day. We put that all on a bunch of dead trees and we threw it in your driveway in the morning. And then the internet sort of came along and said, no, we are going to flatten this. So I wonder how digital platforms and social media in particular have changed the work that you do and the way that people perceive that work.
Yeah. So digital organizing has become a really huge tool and a way to get organizing out into communities relatively quickly and like really broadly. And it's not a substitute for getting on the ground and building real sustainable relationships. So I think one thing that has shifted is, digital organizing is enough, or just giving people information will then create a different outcome, or people will then make a different or right choice if we just give people information. And that's not necessarily the case. So that's like one way that I think the internet and online information has shifted organizing. And then the other is like we can actually get our stories out and not wait on a local newspaper to find a hook for our issue, that we can actually just create a platform ourselves and put our stories out there and put our demands out there. And it's not enough. So I would say like digital organizing can look a lot like AstroTurf. Like it looks like people have a lot of power or a lot of people behind them, when it's actually very thin engagement. And that is not sustainable for actual material change in communities.
Thanks again to Sarah. You can catch the second half of that discussion next week when we get into the challenges community organizing has faced over the last 20 years. Now, let's get back to the campus protest movement with Sean and his guests at the roundtable.
All right, and thank you all again for returning for one last discussion. We left the table last time talking about some of where the legal issue is going to go and process for the people who were arrested at the Student Union building. Ahmad, we know that next week there's going to be an arraignment. We know that the UNM Police Department are the ones investigating this case, while state police were the riot police that arrived. They were acting in assistance with the UNM Police. Sure. The UNM Police will complete their investigation. What happens next?
So at arraignment, the enter pleas of not guilty, and then there is going to be officer prosecution. They're going to be prosecuted by officers. The DAs will not get involved.
UNM police officers?
Yes, it will be UNM police officers, and possibly with the assistance of state police, depending on their role here, they may be witnesses as well. So bottom line is the DA's office essentially will not be prosecuting these misdemeanor cases.
Okay.
And what will happen is a decision to proceed forward with prosecutions will be made. And ultimately, I think that's a call for UNM through dictating their position to UNMPD as to what the future of this prosecution is going to look like. Are they willing to dismiss these cases? Are they going to work out arrangements to allow for these students to plead to lower charges or maybe some form of disposition that will not be on their record? These are things that will come about after the investigation in the course of the natural lifeline of the case.
Well, thank you for helping us understand what we could expect next in that process. I always like to bring this back about why we were here, why the people even put themselves in that position to be arrested, and why they're doing this. And it's back to divestment. They found a way to do something to impact a international incident and a genocide actively happening, to find a local way to affect that change. And there is history with UNM divesting. Ernesto, can you describe what that history is a little bit?
Yeah, indeed. You know, the University of New Mexico committed to a full divestment from apartheid South Africa in 1985. This was a process that was supported by the UNM president at the time, Tom Ferrer, who was a human rights attorney and who had served on the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights. He basically, proposed a standard that might be incorporated into a university investment policy. And what he suggested is for the university to ask itself, do our investments foster violations of fundamental human rights or violations of international law? And also, do our investments support regimes that practice apartheid or commit genocide? These are things that we should be considering and weighing when we make decisions about investment. And I'll just say one thing about this. The administration of the university has been messaging students in the encampment that they don't have the authority to affect divestment. And I want to just emphasize how shocking this is to assert. The Board of Regents by the New Mexico Constitution have the authority to control and manage the University of New Mexico. If, in fact, they do not have currently control of UNM's finances, everyone needs to know about that. That is really quite incredible.
And I think it's important to note that the Board of Regents are picked by a governor's administration and approved in part by the legislature. So they are also there in part for the taxpayers in New Mexico. I think that's a very important element to understand. Like, those are people directly that should be held accountable. Is that how y'all view it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one thing that I want to emphasize here is that, the divestment from apartheid South Africa was really a demonstration of true leadership at the university. Again, this was a process that was kind of initiated by the president at the time, but with the support of a coalition of both student and community organizations, the Black Student Union, the Associated Students at UNM, the New Mexico Rainbow Coalition, were all involved. Actually, the governor of New Mexico at the time, Tom Anaya, was supportive of divestment as well. They attempted to have the state divest and failed in doing so. But we need this kind of leadership right now. We need this kind of leadership to be willing to investigate, what our financial relations are to a state that has been declared to be practicing apartheid by Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch, and that the International Court of Justice has determined is plausibly engaged in a genocide. This is serious stuff that we need to, as a university community, commit to investigating the extent to which we have financial connections with these crimes, and to contemplate and to consider divestment.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. Now, Paloma, I want to go to you because you're attached to another level of history in all of this in journalism. And I think it's fascinating to first understand that your mother was a broadcast journalist and in fact had covered occupation of a UNM student building. This was in the 80s, right? So you have that background. Your sister is there with you. So now there's 3 journalists in your household, but you're also studying finals. You're a student at UNM. Why was it important for you to cover this every day and as you have, while you have the obligations of a student? Why was it important for you to be there?
Well, my sister and I intended to go shoot video, and then Ella was going to take pictures. Ella's my other reporter at the Daily Lobo. And the three of us were going to take pictures, but then we ended up spending a lot of time there and just got tasked with reporting it as well. And then that's why we felt obligated, because we were there from the start, and the three of us wanted to stay there into the night as well and come back every day.
Do you have any experience covering protest or interacting with police in the way that you have over the past couple weeks?
No, this is all a new experience.
So what are you at the Lobo doing together? And maybe this is something your mom is offering advice now on. What are you doing to sort of navigate how to cover this while managing, the emotions and feelings that come forward with it, and also being a student?
At the time, we were in transition of editor-in-chief, so the incoming and outgoing editor-in-chief were really supportive. Lily and Maddie, they had good conversations with us and even gave us riot gear if we needed it.
Okay.
And they were really supportive in making sure that our mental health is the top priority, and said if you don't want to cover this, you don't have to. So, but we did it, and it was a group effort.
Your twin sister took this photo,
Yeah.
right? And this is in the middle of kind of all the chaos when state police arrived. When you saw her step up as close as she could to get to that place, what are you thinking in your head?
I was scared for her, because she took that picture, but she also took video, and she had the camera right in their faces. And I came up to her, I was like, be mindful of the fact that they have batons and they could charge at any moment. But she got right in their shoes and in front of the protesters, and I was just like, wow.
And there was you also do editing on multimedia work, so you also edit and package all the video that you review after everything had happened and occurred. And watching that video, did you notice or did you experience any instances where police might have stopped you and prevented you from doing your job?
Yes, I feel like we did. I was kind of shouting at Layla to record a certain instance of 3 cops tackling one student.
Okay.
And in that moment, a cop ran to me and kind of grabbed my arm and said, out the door. And you can hear his voice in the video. He pulled me out the door, and then he did the same thing with my sister Layla. While she was recording, he grabbed her by the backpack and kind of just pushed us out the door. And they were making a lot of people go out the door, but this is also right in the middle of us recording a big moment. So,
Well, thanks for sharing that, Ahmad. This is the first time you're hearing this. I'm curious, what are your thoughts on their account?
I have to tell you, first, I'm very inspired by Paloma and Elena. Thank you for what you do. Second, it's a scary.
Excuse me.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Pardon me. Yes. So it's a scary prospect to relive through their eyes the fear of being a student and having to face the extraordinary, heavy-handed approach by law enforcement on a UNM campus, a campus that should be free from the forcible silencing of freedom of expression. It is an extremely touching, if you will, in some respect, narrative about the view from this side. And I think it'd be very important for UNM, President Stokes, and the university, faculty, administration, to hear out this particular experience and understand what chaos has been brought about at the university, instead of an approach that involved de-escalation and allowing for freedom of speech, protecting it, and putting in measures for a more conducive, productive, positive area of sharing knowledge, as Ernesto talked about historically, for example, when divestment of apartheid South Africa was in place. And the administration was part of the inspiration movement in that regard. So
He even mentioned the governor at the time, the state of New
That's
Mexico
correct.
was involved. And so, yeah, there's history here. Now, we're getting close to wrapping all this conversation up, and clearly we're going to continue all of this. But I really also want to understand sort of how we're viewing this, why we're here. There's all kinds of manners of horrors happening in the world, happening outside of our homes in New Mexico right now. So, like, why within this group of people that you're all working with in different spaces, this generation, why are we choosing this issue right now to take on the risks of following it and covering it? And I think first, Ernesto, I want to ask you this question. Why?
Well, genocide concerns all of humanity, really. Raphael Lemkin, who coined the term genocide and campaigned for the establishment of the Genocide Convention, referred to genocide as the crime of all crimes. In December, the International Court of Justice found it plausible that Israel was committing acts in Gaza that violate the Genocide Convention. Francesca Albanese, the special rapporteur on the situation of human rights in the Palestinian territories, concluded that there are reasonable grounds to believe that the threshold indicating Israel's commission of genocide has been met. And in a recent federal case regarding U.S. complicity in Israel's genocide, the U.S. District Judge Jeffrey White stated, quote, "As the ICJ has found, it is plausible that Israel's conduct in Gaza amounts to genocide. It's now every individual's obligation to confront the current siege in Gaza." So, in other words, all of humanity, including New Mexicans, have a moral obligation to stand up and speak out against genocide, and specifically our government's complicity in that genocide. The U.S. government has funded and financed this genocide through billions of dollars of aid by providing diplomatic cover in the UN Security Council, for a period of time, defunding relief agencies in Gaza. We're directly implicated at the moment in these crimes, and it's all of our responsibilities to stand up and to speak out against genocide.
Thank you for sharing that. Paloma, you answered this a little bit earlier, but I'm curious from what you're hearing in your reporting from students, from people at the camp, why are people taking the risk to participate in this?
Well, a conversation that we had at the sub was like exchanging, are you scared tonight? Like, are you scared of getting arrested? And a lot of people told us that this is a issue that is bigger than themselves at this point, and they're willing to risk legal repercussions. They said, I mean, kids are being bombed in Gaza, and I'll face academic or legal repercussions. I can fix that. This is a bigger issue, and so that's why we're willing to be out here. And that's what a lot of students told us that night when we talked to them, and Ella asked them that question, like, why are you here willing to risk? Especially at this hour, and like it's a scary environment, but that was an answer from a lot of people.
Okay. Ahmad, we got 90 seconds. From your viewpoint as a citizen of New Mexico, as a taxpayer, not from the legal perspective, I'm curious, why are you paying attention to this?
Well, I want to comment on the generation that that are inspiring.
Sure.
I think social media has a lot to do with showcasing atrocities around the world, where we didn't have that in our generation. We had a narrative that was dictated by the media that was essentially had one particular narrative. Mm-hmm. And now this generation has seen the atrocities firsthand. They know the political narrative. They're smarter than those that are espousing hate. They are truly after justice for all people, whether that happens to be in Gaza or anywhere else in the world. And I think as a New Mexican, especially, we are a state that has a very warm and inspiring community, from the Native American communities, the Hispanic communities, those communities that have always sought justice and may have faced injustice in their own way historically, want to come to the table and fight for justice everywhere. And I applaud this generation. They have put Palestine back on the map, and they are speaking the truth because they see it, because social media has allowed for that to happen.
Excellent. Well, I really do appreciate all the conversation that we have here. And while we have to stop here, we know that this is going to be ongoing. We're going to be following this as it develops internationally with how the United States and Israel, when and if they stop their ceasefire. But at the same time here too, we're going to be tracking all of this locally. There's a lot of work that's going to be happening on this front. Paloma's going to be doing a lot of work on that, and we're going to see where that goes. So it'll be an interesting year as we track the rest of this. Thank you all for this, and thank you all for watching. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
We wanted to include UNM's perspective in this week's show, so we asked to interview President Garnet Stokes. The university declined to make her available. Next, we sent a list of emailed questions to Stokes through her spokesperson, Cinnamon Blair, who is also chair of the KNME Board of Directors. We asked why Stokes chose to call state police into the Student Union building on April 30th. Here was the response. Quote, "Given the size of UNMPD and its limited ability to manage events with large crowds while still meeting the everyday needs of our campus community, NMSP has been consistently called upon to support our officers in managing the enforcement of our policies and the law, especially when there is a repeated failure to comply with UNMPD directives," end quote. We also wanted to know where Stokes stands on the divestment resolution. "It's complicated," came the response. So Stokes and other university leaders have been speaking with various people and groups on campus to examine the, quote, "potential cultural, geopolitical, and financial impacts," end quote, of divestment. So far, Stokes says, there is no campus-wide consensus. So, quote, "additional engagement is required," end quote. Lastly, we asked what principals and advisors Stokes consults when trying to balance the First Amendment with the safety and academic interests of the whole campus community. She referred us to UNM's respectful campus policy, which the university adopted in 2011. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.
Funding for New Mexico in Focus provided by the viewers like you.